Alright, so my document was the Declaration of Sentiments, which was composed by Elizabeth Cady Stanton. So this document was made for women's independence, and it was written in 1848. So in order for like these rules to get passed, 100 people needed to sign it, and 32 women signed it, and 68 men signed it. So the goal of this document was to demand basic human rights for women, so the right for women to vote, own property, and have equal status under the law. So women weren't really able to have their own lives unless they were married, so they couldn't really do anything that they wanted. They needed a man to always guide them. So this goal was to make them independent from men. So along with independence, this document was really formed by the Declaration of Independence, where the women kind of listed off how their rights were being abused. So they listed off a lot of their rights, like he has taken all her rights of property, he has denied her of all facilities needed for a higher education. So they listed off about 20 points like that. Yeah. So they wanted to achieve these goals just because they needed to have the same rights as men.
So basically, after that happened in 1848, when that was released and eventually signed, it kind of went on multiple years later. Fast forward to 1919, where they started to call for the passage of the 19th Amendment, which was started to give the women's right to vote, and that was a big push. And it took about 75 years for that to happen. And the suffrage movement was a very obvious, very set goal, and it was one of equality. And they really wanted to push for the equality between the two genders, especially the right to vote. It was after World War I where Congress and higher state legislatures started to talk about this a bit more, and it was around that time that the bill actually came into signing, right? And the last person to sign it was Harry Byrne, and Harry Byrne had this huge decision in his hands. And it is funny how literally the fate of women in our country was decided by one guy. That would always be seen as unfair. But anyways, he was about to sign it, or he was actually really struggling with what he should do. He was struggling if he should sign it or not sign it. And basically what happened is he got a letter from his mom. And his mom pretty much told him, hey, I should be able to vote. We should all be able to vote. So Harry Byrne had this amazing decision of saying aye to the decision of to amend it. So basically this guy did what all guys are supposed to do. He listened to his mom. And these themes of women being suppressed by men and things like that are really seen in the story of An Hour, where our protagonist, our heroine of the book, or the short story, is left alone after her husband allegedly passes away. And she feels so free because women at the time really didn't have freedom at all. They were kind of on a leash. So once she figures out he's alive again, she passes away of a heart attack. And it kind of just shows how they were so oppressed that when they got the taste for freedom, they really couldn't live without it anymore. And it just shows this kind of theme of why they needed the freedom and what really was going on in the world. It kind of gave a real life example of what the suffrage movement was fighting for. And once that bill passed, it was a huge step forward for equal rights in America. And it's a fight that's still going on today. It's a really important thing to continue to talk about.
In my readings was the Brown versus Board education, opinion of the court, and was the Brown education a failure? The battle may be fought in the courtroom, but not the field. This case all started when Linda Brown wanted to go to her school just a couple blocks away, but instead she had to bus all the way across the town. At this time, Jim Crow was strong, and 17 states were still segregated. Denying someone of their education is a form of taking their freedom away. You're making a person feel less, because when they're not able to expand their mind. And black schools were simply not equal to white schools. The buildings were all worn down, the books were worn down, and even the buses were worn down. from previous use. The separate but equal document, or in the court case, versus Plessy versus Ferguson, stated that it's a necessity that the facilities should be provided equal as the buildings and everything, as they should have the same opportunities of their separate but equal. This case was argued December 9, 1952, and re-argued December 8, 1953, and the final argument was 1954. My second reading was Brown versus the Board of Education of Failure. Change can be long and complicated. During the 70s and 80s, the achievement gap between whites and black students started to close at a rapid rate, as people were catching up, as African Americans were taking advantage of the education that they were receiving. But there was problems with this, as when they had the desegregation, some of the black schools were terminated, and that was the result of black teachers being fired. And then there was also the part where some of the students also didn't live close to the other schools, so they had to bus across town. And it was rough on the colored students because they weren't just going to a new school, but they were going to a school where people didn't look like them. And racism was strong, and they weren't treated right, but their protest changed everything. And that their protest actually means a lot to me, because I'm taking the opportunity, as times are different, and I'm able to be at a school where people don't just look like me, but there's also different people, and I'm able to just be around and just learn about new people.
Yeah.